and good morning, gamers. Welcome to another session of DnDaily. This is number 47 and it's Monday. So today's topic is going to be another Mental Health Monday topic. But before I get into that, just a real quick touch base on the state of editing in the world of 1 in 20 D&D. I am this close to finishing the next Car Wars video, which is part 2 of Battle 2, and I'm just really stoked with how it's all finally coming together. And as I have probably mentioned it, if not, I'm gonna say it again, I'm gonna try to get to a point where I'm putting very consistently 2 game videos out every week. That's my next goal here, so I will stay on top of that and do my best to have that set in motion as quickly as possible. And then once that is actually sort of running, I'm going to try to create a actual set schedule for everyone. So like probably Tuesdays and Fridays are new videos. At least that's the thought right now. However, stay tuned. I will have much more on the way in that regards. Now, enough about the station and that silliness and what's coming. Let's talk about spaces, and more importantly, safe spaces, and what that means in regards to playing role-playing games. So, the thought that was in my mind this morning was about creating safe spaces and the importance of this in today's modern kind of environment and where we stand today. I want to say right out the gate that I really feel like it's sort of the DM's responsibility, or the GM, whoever's running the game. On a certain level, it is your responsibility to create a safe space for your players. Now, it's everyone's responsibility at the table to do this on some level as well. And if you are the DM, you're the de facto leader. So you kind of have to set the tone and set the guidelines, and that's part of what I'm going to talk about in this session here. So how do you create well, let's start before that. What does a safe space even mean? Why is that important? When we're playing role-playing games, I'm going to focus in on, again, D&D specifically, but this applies to any role-playing game, especially games maybe more like a Vampire the Masquerade or this kind of game, where it's very role-play heavy. When you're creating a game that's a role-play heavy game, you have to imagine that you're sort of like actors on a stage in a way. And if everyone who's playing their character is going to really come out of their shell and be able to like test the limits with their character, they have to feel safe and secure and comfortable at the table. Now, for some people, it's super easy. I'm willing and happy to get into a role and just get out there. Now, I will sort of temper my play to the other people that I'm engaged with. If someone else wants to sort of go deep, then I'll do that with them. I'll try to be a good partner, let's say, in that role playing, whether I'm as the DM or whether I'm as the player. Because as the DM, I have to be able to connect and do that with each of my players. And then if I'm a player, I need to do that with the other players as well as with the DM. Some people are more comfortable with this. Some people are more skilled with this. I mean, if you have acting training and you've done some of that, you're obviously going to have a little bit easier time getting into the role. But that doesn't take away from the fact that even if you're a total amateur, but you have the desire, if you want to play the role of your character, you need to feel like it's a safe place to do that. Now, how do you do that? You need to avoid things like, poking fun at each other. Obviously, if you're good friends and you've known each other for a while, some gentle ribbing and that mockery and that kind of thing are going to be fine in most cases, because now you've established a friendship, you sort of know each other's quirks and things like that. It's okay. So if you already have that long-term friendship, you've already on some level established a safe space. But I'm talking about, like, from the get-go, how do you create a safe space? First and foremost, I think it's a very important thing to have sort of a session zero. And this is really important for a long-term game. If it's a one-shot, if it's a short-term game, if you're in a game studio or a game, a game store, or you're at a convention, another way to do this is just from the very beginning, when the DM sits down at the table and all the players sit down at the table, lay the groundwork. Lay the foundational rules for your table. And they should be simple things like, so these things are not allowed at the table. I just want to make this clear right from the gate. This is how you might present it. These things are not allowed from the beginning. Obviously, no bullying, no sexism, no name calling, and so forth. Direct attacks towards other players are not cool and won't be tolerated. You just set those things at the beginning, and you make it a zero tolerance. Some things, maybe it's going to happen and you don't know it's going to happen, and so you have to deal with that as it arises. If one of your players comes to you and says, hey man, this other player is making me feel really uncomfortable because of all the constant sexual innuendo and because of the things that they're doing in our games, they're making me really uncomfortable. Well, in that case, in order to maintain a safe and feeling environment, then you're going to have to take those things case by case. So that, again, comes back on you. You decide from the beginning what kind of things are and are not acceptable. And it's a big topic. I'm really only going to be able to just touch base on this right here. So I'm going to say at this point now, if you have questions about this, specific questions, let me know and I'll address specific questions in the future. So, bringing it back to what I'm talking about, safe space, creating safe space. First and foremost, I think what I'm saying is there has to be some ground rules. So, what are some good ground rules? I would suggest that bullying of any kind, that is to say, if you have a player at the table who is constantly bossing the other players, like telling the other players how to play their characters, in my game, that is not cool. That will not fly. I will try to stop it in the moment it happens, or if I feel like I need to be a little more tactful, after the session's over, I will pull that player aside and say to them point blank to their face, I will not beat around the bush or anything. I will let them know, hey man, or hey girl, whatever, hey gal, hey person, I'm not trying to be sexist myself, I'm just saying, hey, this is not okay. When we're playing our game, I need you to let the other players play their character. I understand that you feel this way, and that's fine for your character, and if you want to share some thoughts or suggestions or advice, that's fine out of the game, but during the session, not cool. Those are the kind of conversations you have to have. Some of them are going to be uncomfortable. Another thing that, again, me personally, a rule that I would set, absolutely no sexism. It's not okay. That's a little bit harder to gauge for me. I mean, because that's kind of subjective, because what I might think is sexist might not be sexist, perceived as being sexist to someone else. And I'm going to give you a perfect example of this. I invited one of my good friends into our Wednesday game. He is a great guy. He and I know each other very well. So our humor, it by some standards, it can be very crass. And that's how we are. When we're by ourselves, when we're just hanging out, we tell gross jokes. We tell jokes that could be perceived as being sexist and so forth. They're not intended to be, we certainly are not haters of any kind. It's just our sense of humor. We think you have to laugh at life, especially the sensitive areas of life. You kind of have to have a good sense of humor about them, and that sort of diffuses the energy of it. Well, he came into our game, and there was a session where he cracked a joke that sort of set my alarms off of like, oh crap, because we have a gal in the party that a gal playing in the game, and he said something that was a little off color, and it sort of like made me go, oh shoot, I hope no one took offense to that. And again, we all have our different tastes, we all have our different, again, subjective views of the world. And so all I did was, after the game, I said something to him, and I approached my other player and said, hey, I'm concerned that you might have taken offense to this. I said something already to my guy. Are you cool? Was there any problem? I just communicated. That's it. And you know what? I was the one that was overreacting. Neither one of them thought it was any kind of a big deal at all. And none of the other players had any kind of issue with it either. So it was me maybe being overly cautious, which is probably a good idea, to err on the side of being a little extra cautious. So, again, there's some basic ground rules that I set for my game. I've told all the players so they all kind of know. If I start a new game, I did it with this new Tuesday game I'm running. Look, here's what I would like to do. Here's what I want. And I'm constantly checking in with them too. So I think there's a few rules that you need to set. I've touched base on a couple of them. There's some great rules out there that you can find. Lots of people have posted like PDFs or videos about their game rules for their sessions. Go check those out. There's some great ones. Again, if you have specific questions, by all means, please ask me. So I think that's the first step in creating a safe space. And I guess that's what I'm going to make the focus of this video. What are some of the first steps to creating a safe space for your game? And that is to have some rules. Have some rules about what's acceptable at the table, what's not. And then you have to enforce them. And the way to enforce them is by communicating. And if it is a problem, you just have to ask the person to leave. It's uncomfortable. However, in order to get the kind of amazing, juicy, wonderful, incredible games where there's highs and lows of emotion and everybody feels okay going there, you have to create that space to begin with. So, DMs, I encourage you to create the rules. If you haven't made it clear ahead of time and maybe you feel like it's important, have a sit down with everyone at the table and say, hey, how's the game going? Here's a thought. I'd like to set this on the table for everybody just so, everyone's comfortable and feels like they're a part of this and they're being respected. Have those conversations. That's all you got to do. It's worth it. It's worth it. And starting the game is, if you're starting a new game and you do a session 0 where everybody has a meet and greet, you kind of introduce each other and do that. And even if you do some basic gameplay in your session 0 to establish the characters, there's that 2-level game, right? There's 2 levels of the game. There's the game itself, which is all the characters, the NPCs, what kind of game is it going to be? That's another level I'll talk about and I have mentioned before, because the kind of game you're running also plays into how safe the people playing the game are going to feel. So there's one layer of the game itself, there's the other layer of the players, everybody at the table, the GM and the players. And I'm talking in this video was all about that upper level of like creating a safe space for the GM and the players. Because if we're offending each other, people are not going to be feeling comfortable. If they're not feeling comfortable, they're not going to feel safe. And if they're not going to feel safe, they're not going to have a good time at your table. So it's your responsibility as a GM, DM to create this by establishing the guidelines and then communicating and getting feedback. It's a constant thing. It's a progress. It's something that'll happen over time. You're not going to have a group that feels perfectly safe with each other from day one. Unless you're incredibly lucky. It could happen. But chances are, it takes a little bit of time. It takes many sessions to get to that point. So by starting from the beginning, setting the ground rules, and then communicating with each other, that's how you're going to start to create the safe space. I think next week I'll talk more about creating a safe space in how you run the game and the content of the game, because that is going to play into what people are comfortable with. I'll use some specific examples from my own experience to tie that in. Hope this was helpful. Hope this is a good start to understanding like why and how to create a safe space. We as DMs have a responsibility to our players to make them feel comfortable so that they can have fun. Because, as I've said before, the ultimate goal of playing a role-playing game is to have fun. So, questions, comments, thoughts, please share them with me. DM or comment in this video. Thank you for taking the time to enjoy and share with me these moments. I appreciate every one of you. I'll see you at a table someday. Someday, I'll see you at a table. But until then, keep rolling 20s.